Hey everybody and welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to do a really high-level overview of Noodle, which is a free codeless application development platform. Now, I'm going to put a link in the description to a video that covers 3, or I should say 2.5 other or total free builders, but today we're going to cover Noodle. So you can go to noodle.net/open source to learn more about the free aspect of this platform. As we scroll down, you'll see that their open core model has self-hosting applications free, previously priced at $2.99 a month. So you can learn more at the Noodle website. But basically, I'm just going to head over to their main site, and I have another video on how to actually download and run it. Really straightforward. You click download, find your relevant install file, and it's that simple. Now, we're going to go through the website really quickly because there's going to be a need for different resources depending on what you're trying to build. So what we can do is start off with their docs, and I'm going to make this very high level. So you can go through and try to figure out, based on what you need to read. But we're going to go through the interface in a bit. So you can learn more about the different types of components. The main thing to note for the component side of things is how they work and what happens when you click something if you want to link components to certain actions. Again, you can learn more about all of these like JavaScript, things of that nature, and you can see features for these different items here. So tons of different options, and you'll even see videos like building clones of different websites just to show you how powerful the platform is. Now what we're going to do is we are going to jump over into the blog. And again, we'll make this very quick. You can scroll through, read these different posts, but the main thing to note are going to be your videos, integrations, and your community section. So there's tons of different videos on all sorts of different options, from using AI to using tables to display data. So you'll see they have tons of video tutorials. And as you can tell or see, these are very, very thorough. Almost 2 hours for some of these videos. Now, the last thing is going to be integrations, and this is going to be increasingly useful if you need to build anything that links to external databases and things of that nature. So you'll see all of these different integrations here that you can work with. Tons of really, really cool things and additional modules over here. Now, the community, you have a couple of options to connect with other individuals. I highly recommend taking advantage of this, especially if you're someone who has knowledge that you can share. So that's most of the actual website itself. Let's jump into the program here. So I've opened up Noodle for the first time. I'm going to click Create Project, and then you'll see we have a couple of different options. Now, I personally prefer the top bar navigation, and then we'll just title it very quickly, and then you'll have the ability to select project folder location. For this, I'll just save it to the default, and then you'll see that it creates it, and now we have essentially jumped into the Noodle builder. So you'll have quite a few different options going from the top left all the way to the top right. So what we can start out with is simply just looking at the actual options that we have here. So you'll see some of this is not selectable. I mean, we can highlight, but some things that look like a component might not be. So it's something that you'd have to look at a little bit more closely. So you'll see when we click on Settings, Profile, and Home, these buttons are already linked to different locations within the app. So up here, we have the Preview Routes option. So you'll see when we go to the Home option, and then it continues on from there. So all these are already linked. Now, you do have the ability to check the zoom level. You can also choose the viewport options here, and you can go to switch between design and preview up here. Now, when we go to the utility components, you'll see that we have this media query option where you can see and ask Noodle AI if you have any specific questions. It's a great place to start just to figure out if there's something in particular that you need to work with or learn more about or try to do something with. Now, if we go to our header menu, as you can see, it's a little bit more complex for this simple page, but you can understand the logic pretty easily. So you'll see we have a header group here, which you can see in the main application when we hover over it what that essentially includes. Then you have your logo, which you can see here. And then as we move through, as you select an item or option, you'll see that it's highlighted and basically just shows up here. So if we have this company text here, for example, so you have a couple of options. So you can double click and extract or delete. But if we select the option here, company, over here on the left-hand side, we have all of the different options to customize this specific and currently selected component. So for example, if we want to change the text, we could put the new text that we want here, and you can choose different options, but once you click out, you'll see that it updates. So that text has been updated. You'll see that we have an icon. Maybe we want to choose a new icon. So we can scroll through from these pre-selected or pre-provided options. Maybe we want to provide an icon like this little move icon here. So you'll see it's now updated up top. Now, you can continue through that for the pre-built options in this application. For example, you'll see that we have a page navigation content. Now, you have a couple of types. You can choose the predefined JSON or CSV, and then you'll see the JSON file here. Now, this, although it may look a little confusing, the idea here is this is basically your site mapping. So you'll see that we have the icon, label, and URL. So if you wanted to change one of these options, for example, if we wanted to set settings to take us somewhere else, like maybe the home page, then all you have to do is set that and just change that text. So if we wanted to change it to home, then that's really all that we would need to do. You can click test code, or if you want, you can basically just click out of this. So at this point, if we click on settings, you'll see it takes us to home. And if we click home, it's obviously not doing anything because we're already there. But now both of these are blue because we're on the correct page. However, profile will take us to profile. And again, same thing with settings. So pretty straightforward as far as actually building out what the JSON is. Now, you do have the ability to copy and add additional content as well. So you can typically follow the format. You'll see that we would have this comma, and then we may want to give a little gap, and then we can add one more, and you can basically just make that label whatever you want. You can select test code if you want to try things out, but you'll see that new profile option appears here. So pretty straightforward. And again, you can choose these icons and test out different icons if you're interested, but that at least shows you how to manage the navigation, and it's very, very easy to choose between those options. So we'll click in here to get rid of that menu, and you'll see that we have the options here for the navigation. So you can click in here to see a little bit more, or we can go back to the header menu. So the idea is if I select this, or double click, we go into the navigation, and then we can basically go back by clicking on the header menu. So you'll see all of the different options here for what happens if this is done, or the menu items, etc. So the idea here is you can just kind of see and edit the logic for what's already there. And that same thing works for duplicating that logic. If you want to actually build on this, you can. So we have the header menu covered and the general content. So again, if you want to select an item or figure out, okay, where is a certain item? For example, if I hover over this, I can see that everything on the top is selected. So maybe at this point, if you double click it, maybe you need to have this CTA button do something specific. So you just find that button within the navigation menu. You're basically just zooming into it. So the navigation menu has all of this. When we go into it, we have the ability to access the actual components themselves. So for example, if we wanted to call this button something new, we could say, hey, and just call it the exact same thing as what was over there. And then you have the ability to enable an icon if you're interested. and some additional options, like maybe we want to change the color to something a little different. Now, you have a ton of different options for customizability, including additional HTML options. But what we're going to do right now is just go back to our components screen here. Now, you'll see that we have all of these different pages. If we wanted to, we have the option to duplicate a page by selecting this option here. We can also add in additional options or delete or rename, etc. But I have this home screen copy. So you'll see up here, we have different options as far as what is assigned to what. So if we have this home copy, we can build on it or rename it here if we're interested. So we'll just call this page 2. So pretty straightforward. Now, if we wanted to build on this, we can go to our components menu, and then from there we can figure out, okay, what exactly would we want to add? So we can click on visual component and add something from there, or we can add a logic component from this screen as well. Now, you have the ability to search from within this menu or screen as well if you're interested, but right now you'll see that we can also use these navigation menu options. So page 2, if we want, we'll click on visual component and we'll just call it 1. And we have the ability to essentially work from within a group here if we're interested, or we can ask Noodle AI if we have a specific question. So you can go through and look at version control, which we're not going to cover much today, and we're also not going to cover cloud services and things of that nature. But the general idea is if we decided we want to work with components from within a given page, then we can go to our page. We can choose, okay, we already have these options. What else do we potentially want to add? Do we want to add a page component? Do we want to add a folder, logic component, visual component, etc.? So we can add another component here, and we'll call it 2. Now, you'll see with page 1, we have all of the content listed underneath. So if we had item 1 here that we wanted to work with, we can try to figure out what exactly is it that we wanted to build, work with, etc. So you'll have that group, and you can kind of work from within this area. So let's ask Noodle AI, how do I add a button? And then we'll send that question. Now, in this case, you would need to have your OpenAI API key. So you would need to have ChatGPT 4 set up, but that would be how you would get started with adding or asking questions like, how do I get a specific component? All right, so we're going to go ahead and add a component right now. So what we did previously is an option on the tree, which if you don't see what I'm actually doing here, this option here is going to be your visual component. Basically, you have the ability within this to manage groups. But if we just select page 2, and then down here, we can right click. When you do this, you'll bring up this node or this section here. Now you can use a couple of basic UI elements. For example, if we wanted to add in, let's just say text. Now it's not going to do anything yet, but you'll see that we can actually select the text and drag it around. So if we add it into this tree here, so you'll see the home text is in the middle. Maybe we want to add it before the home text. So now the text will appear over here. Now we have the ability to choose the alignment. So if we wanted to, we could work with different options like centering, things of that nature. And then we can choose height, alignment. There's tons of different options. So the idea here is you would just manage all of those options from here, including text, font size, color, and the text itself, like putting in something like hello. Now when we select off, or if you wait a second, sometimes it'll just populate here. And all of this is being done in page 2. So if we were to click on our home, it'll take us back to the home where we don't have this content, but you'll still see the original page 2 down here. So you can navigate independently of the actual UI itself. So what we'll do is we're going to click on the drop down and you'll see all of our pages here. So we'll select page 2 and now we have everything here. So let's right click and try a couple of other options. So if you scroll through, you'll see that we have options for these prefab, which is basically just your prefabricated or pre-created options. So maybe we want to do something like this tab bar. We can click clone. So once you've cloned your components, I personally like doing all of the cloning up front, and then you can just choose them from your project components. So when we scroll down, you'll see we have tab bar item, navigation menu, and item. So if we go back, let's say we want to maybe clone a couple more. We can go to prefabs and let's choose date picker. Now, once we have that date picker success message, when we go to components and scroll down, you'll see we have date picker. So now we can add it, and then when you select it, you can choose where you want it to go or essentially what you want it to do. So when I add it here, you'll see that we have the date picker that is now visible in the UI. And you can then work with what functionality you want it to do. So when you're working with components, you'll notice that we have something that is, if you're familiar with AppGyver or other logic builders, you have the ability to build out the logic for what that item or what it does. So an example is we have our options here, but nothing really does anything. So when we select this, this appears only because that component's pre-built to do that. But if we click on the text, nothing happens. And that's because we haven't told anything to do anything. So you'll see when we right click again, you have the ability to also manage component utilities and logic utilities. So you'll have delays, drag, counters, logic. You'll see we can switch and you'll see what it can do, or the ability to add in conditions, which or in conditions are huge for building complex applications. You'll see we can also do things like system. We have the ability to check tons of different other options. And you'll see we also have these outputs under component utilities. So you'll see what do we want to do based on a variety of different options. All right, so if we wanted to set something like maybe selecting text to perform an action, we have a couple of options. So we'll delete this. And the main idea for showing the right click and going through these different options is just to show you if you need to access something or do something that you can get to most of it from this menu here. Now, you'll see that if we wanted to do something like navigation, I would consider this in some other builders kind of like a utility or a logic event, but in this platform, we're going to be using the navigation option. So we have a couple of different options. Maybe we want to show a pop-up when something's selected. So you'll see that we have this show pop-up option. So the idea here is you can connect logic by doing something like this, simply dragging to that component or that logic. So now we have options. What do we want to do? Do we want to do it when we hover? Do we want to do it when we click? So what we'll do is we'll do the simple, which is click. And then what we're going to do is basically just show the given option over here. So that's really all that there is to it. So when it clicks on this side, we're going to show a pop-up. And that is the general idea. So you'll see when we have hello, if you were to select it, that would essentially show this pop-up. Now with the pop-up, you would have to choose what that pop-up is going to be. So we have to have a target. So rather than make this more complex, what I'm going to do is I will just try to choose a sample option and we'll just see how it works from here. So if we were to hover over hello, right now nothing is happening. But when we click it, you'll see that now we have this not so attractive menu option that appeared here. So that's really the pop-up in action. So if we were to choose a different page to kind of refresh and come back, so we choose home, go back to page 2, you'll see this is what the top left looks like. And when we click the text, we now have this little menu that appears, and that's this show pop-up, and this is the target of what it's pulling. So maybe we want to choose something else. Maybe we want to select this option 2 and see what happens. So now when we click the text, it's basically going to be performing that action instead. So if we went back to home, and then we can come back to page 2, and then you can kind of work with that text and see what it would render, bearing in mind that if you don't customize the pop-up and the target, you may not be able to see exactly what you're trying to work with. But that at least shows you that logic. Now, maybe we want to add something different. So maybe we want to do a navigation menu, and we want to navigate. So what we can do here is you'll see that we can connect this page to the navigate. So if we choose target page, maybe I want this to take us to this page with the letter A. So you can choose here if you want to open a new tab or not. And then the idea is we just select and drag. Now let's try something like hover start this time and just make it a little different. And then we'll choose navigate, and now it's all set. So that is basically set, and the idea is when you would hover over a certain item, then it would perform whatever that action might be. So we can go back here and you'll see navigate, and what we're going to do, I'm just going to choose a different page just to have it take us home instead of page 2. So you'll see when hover starts, it's ideally going to perform this navigate option. So in this case, you would need to kind of manage what that hover start is going to look like to see if you're actually going to get it to perform the right action at the right time. So what we'll do is we'll rebuild this one really quickly. So we will select navigate, and we will choose navigate, and we'll choose a page. We'll make it home, and then we will drag this over. And then again, we have our different options, so we can choose hover event or any of the other ones, but we'll choose hover end this time. And then you'll see the actions here, which are navigate. And then that's pretty much all that there is to it. So the idea is hover end, you'll see over here it says navigate. So select output, and again, we're just trying to figure out what to map to what. So we just want this to perform this action, and you'll know it's complete when it's giving you this option here. All right, so that's covering the majority of those options, and you have the option to use external links and a couple of other things as well. I'm not as big a fan of the hover events personally. I'm more preferable to use just standard navigation techniques. So for example, if we used the click, then it would navigate, and we can choose when we select navigate, target page. You'll just see how much quicker this is. So once we've selected these options, if you were to select whatever that text is, then it would perform whatever that action is, like taking you back to the home page or something along those lines. And I usually like to go back and forth between pages just to make sure that everything's working as expected. So you'll see in this case, when we go back to page 2, when we click here, it takes us back to the home. So sometimes when you're working with some of this logic, for example, what I was previously doing with the home screen, you do have to work a little bit more with going back and forth between pages. So I'll just show the logic for hover one more time, because I think that that's something that people really, really like to use when it comes to pop-ups and tool tips and things of that nature. So if we wanted to do hover start and choose navigate, we would select the page just like I did before. And then you'll notice when we hover, this time it worked pretty quickly. So now we're at the home. But if we were to go back to page 2, if it doesn't perform that action, you can just navigate out and it will essentially refresh. Sometimes it does it, sometimes it doesn't. But
that is that. Now, you can click in to learn a little bit more and see more about the specific options, but what we'll do is we'll go back to page 2 to kind of close things out. So when we select something in page 2 or page 1, as you can see, it's continuing to kind of serve its purpose. But we'll go into this page here. Now, the other main thing to note is if we were to select something, we can delete it by hitting the delete key, and you have a wide range of additional options here. So you have your custom components, you have your UI elements if you wanted to add in sliders and text inputs. So if we chose to add a slider, we can drag it in here, and you'll see that you can use the slider, but you have to define what it actually is over here. And with your text, another thing to remember is you have to choose inputs and outputs and things of that nature. So you'll see that we have our inputs and outputs here, and you can see a visual component or component outputs to learn more. So if we wanted to scroll through, we could pick any of these like component outputs, and you can basically work with these based on what you see in that documentation. Now, one of the cool things with Noodle is if you have questions about certain things, such as component utilities, then when you select it, you can click here to see full docs and see about how to actually use this functionality. So you'll see it's to create inputs for reusable components, and you can essentially work with that here. Now, we have a couple of other UI elements that I think might be useful. So you'll see, for example, some that may have a value, like text input. Maybe you want to put text input here. Well, it immediately works as an input, but you would have to choose what you want it to do based on the logic that you've dictated or determined here. So when it comes to the text input itself, you can customize things here, such as text, the style, all of these other options, just like you can with the slider. So if we select the slider, you'll see we have all of these different options, such as dimensions. Maybe we want to make it different dimensions. So maybe we want to choose something like 50%. And you have the ability to go through the min and max. So you'll see the dimensions are cut. Maybe we want max to be a larger number. Maybe we want the step, which is the amount it increases by. So you'll see now it increases by a larger amount. You can also choose other options here. And then you have your additional advanced HTML. So the idea here is the slider can do a wide range of things, and you can kind of connect it to other things here. So component inputs, for example, you can read to learn more about what those are. But the general idea is you walk through and read or run tasks or create these logic flows based on what you need your components to do. So as you're going through, you'll see that you have your logic utilities, and we could set something like value changed, delay, color blend. So you'll see we have these different options to manage what happens if a certain function is performed or an action is performed in the UI. So that's your basic overview. You do have a search functionality, version control, and a couple of other options, which I'm not going to go into today. And then you'll see we have the project settings here. So that's the main options and things that you would essentially want to look into. Outside of that, you do have your deploy button, and you can see self-hosting, and you can pick folders to deploy your front end to a local folder, and you can learn more about that from the Noodle website. If you have any questions, drop them in the comment box below, and I'll see you all in the next video.